In this video, I'll be showing you how to drive a vehicle with a manual transmission. The first thing you should do is get a diagram that shows where the gears are at on your car. Usually there'll be a diagram printed at the top of the shift knob. My shift knob is aftermarket, so it doesn't have the diagram. So now I'll show you where the gears are at on my car. First gear is all the way to the left and all the way up. That's first gear. Then all the way left and down, second gear. Then I push it up a little, and then that'll bring it into neutral. And notice when you bring it into neutral, it automatically snaps back into the middle. So after second gear, when I bring it into neutral, it'll snap back in the middle, and then I just push it straight up. That's third gear. Then I just pull it straight down, fourth gear, and then I push it back in the neutral, pull it all the way to the right, and push it all the way up, and that's fifth gear. And then reverse on my car is all the way to the right and down. And of course, when you're driving, you want to be absolutely sure that you don't go into reverse. A lot of cars, they have protection against that so that you can't enter reverse while you're moving. The next thing you should do before you start driving is get familiar with where everything is at. The main things you'll notice that's different with a manual car is that you have the shifter, of course, and you have a third pedal, the clutch pedal. Whenever you use the clutch, it's very important that you push it all the way to the floor, as far back as you can. And another thing that is very different from an automatic to a manual is that you drive with 2 feet. You use your right foot like you would in an automatic for the brake and for the accelerator, and then you use your left foot for the clutch. It's hard to get used to if you're used to an automatic, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. Another thing you'll notice is that usually on manual cars you'll have a tachometer like this. My car originally didn't come with one, so I installed one. This isn't essential to being able to drive a manual, but it can be helpful. If you don't have one of these, you pretty much just have to listen to how loud the engine gets to get an idea of what RPMs it's at, and so that you know when to shift. The next thing you should do is practice driving manual while the car is turned off and you have your emergency brake applied. The emergency brake is another important part of driving a manual shift car. Whenever you're parked, you should have the emergency brake applied so that your car isn't free to roll. So now we can start practicing driving a manual shift car. The first thing you'll do when you first take off is press in the clutch all the way, put the car into first gear, and then slowly release the clutch while you give it a little bit of gas, like that. If you have a fuel injected car, you should be able to push in the gas pedal with no problem, but I've seen some vehicles that weren't fuel injected that inject fuel into the engine even when the car is turned off. So if your car isn't fuel injected, it might be a good idea just to pretend like you're pressing the gas pedal. Alright, so again, I'll show you first gear. Clutch all the way in, first gear, and then give it a little bit of gas while I'm releasing the clutch pedal, and then you'll start rolling, and then you give it a little bit of gas and you'll get to a certain RPM, at which point you'll release the gas and simultaneously press in the clutch like that. Then you'll pull it into second gear, and after first gear it gets a lot easier. So when you go into second gear, you don't have to slowly release it like that. You can just give a little bit of gas again and just release like that, and then that's the same step for all the gears. So first gear, clutch in, give a little bit of gas, release the clutch pedal, you'll start rolling. Gets to a certain RPM, you press in the clutch while simultaneously letting go of the gas. Second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and fifth gear. When you first start practicing driving, you should stay at slow speeds, so you'll probably only get into second or third gear. Alright, now we can practice driving. When you're first learning to drive manual, it's a good idea to go into an empty parking lot or a deserted street. You really don't want to be in any sort of traffic when you're first learning to drive manual. The hardest parts of driving manual are when you first take off, like in first gear and reverse. Once the car is moving, it'll be much easier to get into the next gears after that, second, third, and all those. So, a common problem when you're first taking off in first gear is that the car will stall out. This is typically because you don't give it enough gas, you release the clutch too quickly, or a combination of both. So another common thing that will happen is when you first start taking off, the car will shake very badly. If that starts to happen, immediately push in your clutch, push in the brake, and once you come to a complete stop, start over again. Continue practicing first gear until you have a smooth takeoff. So let me give you an example of what you would do. Push in the clutch all the way, first gear, and then slowly release the clutch while giving it gas. Just like that. Now I'll stop. And that's how it should be when you first take off in first gear. Alright, so now I'll show you how to shift into the gears after first gear. Like I said, first gear is the hardest, so these other gears will be much easier. You don't have to release the clutch as slowly as you do when you're first taking off in first gear. You also don't want to let it go really quickly. Just watch the way I do it and you can get an idea of how quickly you're supposed to do it. And you also want to give it a little bit of gas, not much, just a little bit, so that you help match up the RPMs of the engine with the speed of the transmission. Okay. So, push the clutch in, first gear, release the clutch while giving it gas. Alright. Shift. Shift. And that's it. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to turn with the manual. I'm going to push in the clutch, push the brake, put in the second gear. Now I'm going to make the turn, and then release the clutch, and that way I can start going again. For some cars, it may be a different gear you should shift it in after you get out of the turn, and some people don't even like to push in the clutch when they're making the turn, but I prefer doing it that way, because if you leave it in gear while you're turning, it kind of feels like the car is pushing. It feels like that the engine is pushing the car, and I don't like that feeling. I like it to be like a free feeling as you're turning.
I'll now demonstrate driving on the road in traffic. So I put it into first gear to take off, and it's good to switch the gears every 3,000 RPMs. This gives you good acceleration and it doesn't waste too much gas. The people in front of me are turning, so I press in the clutch and push the brake to slow down. Then once they're out of the way, I release the clutch and give it gas and continue driving. Now I'm in third gear. I continue driving, and when it gets to 3,000, I switch to fourth gear. And I want to cruise, so now I'm going to put it into fifth gear. And now my car will be at 1,500 RPMs. This is a good RPM to cruise at because it's fuel efficient, and the higher the RPM is that you leave your car in while you're driving, the more gas it wastes. So so 1500 is a good RPM to have it. The problem with leaving it at that RPMs is that you don't have much power to accelerate. So if for some reason you want to accelerate quickly, you can take it out of the gear and put it and downshift into the previous gear so that you'll have better acceleration. So that's my video. I hope I've helped you learn to drive stick shift. Thanks for watching.